Hi, this is All Things Voluntary. I'm Brandon, and today I decided to do a rant video because I think this is an appropriate topic for a rant video because I've been seeing these little profile pictures popping up on like Facebook and stuff with $11 minimum wage being displayed in there. Like these are advocating raising the minimum wage. And I've spent a lot of time arguing this topic and getting responses like ad hominem stuff, like you just have an interest in exploiting workers, you're just a useful idiot of the bourgeois or whatever, bullcrap answers or responses. But I wanted to do a video explaining this because I have an interest, in my value set. I want a wealthier society. I think it's good when people make good livings, when there's capital here, when businesses are growing and starting and demanding labor so that people can jump into jobs easy, like they did in the early 1900s. You could just jump into a job or you could leave and find a new job the next day. That was what a thriving labor market looked like. That is what I want. That is what I personally would like to see in the world. So by me saying that we shouldn't have a minimum wage, I'm not like, yeah, exploit workers. We need, corporate. Blah. It's not like that at all. I want a thriving middle class. I want a strong, growing economy where people are doing better and better every year, every day. So, I'm going to show why I advocate getting rid of the minimum wage completely. And hopefully this will appeal to other people who actually value the welfare of workers like I do. So, the first thing you have to understand about a minimum wage, the first thing, so critical, is that the minimum wage is a price floor on labor. So it is not a positive mandate. What this means is that the minimum wage is not a law that says the government can force, Ford Motor to give some person who is now an employee extra money. It's not a transfer from a company to persons of money. That's not how a minimum wage works. It is not a positive mandate. What it is a conditional prohibition. I'm going to say this a lot because it is critical to understand this. Minimum wage laws, price fixing of any kind, is a conditional prohibition. It's literally saying that if you can't hire someone for at least an arbitrary, completely arbitrarily, unilaterally imposed minimum, you shouldn't hire them at all. Don't hire them at all if you can't hire them for at least this much. It forbids the hiring of persons for less than an arbitrary price. And understanding that term, arbitrary, that's also pretty important. Because what it means is like the government is completely detached from the market. It collects its revenue by force. It's not sensitive to actual supply and demand forces. It can't rationalize based on the give and take of scarce resources in society because it's made itself completely immune to prices. Any price fixation that it puts on anything is necessarily arbitrary. It's a best guess. I mean, they could literally have best guessed, a $10,000 minimum wage. And where would that have left us? If people actually obeyed it, society would completely collapse. Nobody could hire anyone. No one would have any jobs. Productivity would be shot. We would be eating bugs, basically, if we had a $10,000 minimum wage. Society wouldn't function. But I actually think a $10,000 minimum wage would actually be a good thing because in reality, where people don't always obey the law, at a $10,000 per hour minimum wage, no one would obey it. So you'd have this thriving black market in labor where everyone. I think we would go back to the early 1900s employment market where employment was like minuscule. It was like extremely rare to not have a job because it was just so easy to get one. Be something like that. But coming back to the present, the dismal present. I've raised a few counterexamples to the claim that we need an imposed $11 minimum wage, right? So And also, $11 is an arbitrary number. I've already explained this. It could be anything, but as it comes down, it can come down from 10,000 to $1,000 an hour, $100 an hour, even $50 an hour would destroy our society. It'd be a complete wreck, like it was in American Samoa. Look it up. Look up American Samoa. Figure out what the minimum wage did to their industry. It was just a disaster. Just like the price maximums were in France, in the 1400s. Price fixing doesn't work. It doesn't help anyone because prices actually mean something. Take that to heart. Prices mean something. They're not just something you pay at a grocery store. They mean something. There's a reason that a price is something, is what it is. But if you don't want to make less than $11 an hour, but let's say you're fresh out of high school, you don't have any trade skills, you're very little skilled, whatever, but you say, $11 an hour is a good thing, and because the government's not imposing it yet, I'm going to impose it on myself. What does that mean? You can do literally the exact same thing the government does yourself. You can do it for yourself. You can impose an $11 minimum wage on yourself without the government's help. All you have to do is go apply at 100 different jobs, hire employers in the area where you live, and don't accept a job that doesn't pay you at least $11 an hour. Now, you're going to be searching for a really long time before somebody decides to finally give you an $11 an hour starting wage. And but you're going to soon realize that the difference between $11 and maybe $8 isn't really that big a deal compared to the difference between $8 and the $0 you're making now. So you're going to settle for your next best option. And that's where we start to arrive at the market price. You see, in the market, negotiating over a table is actually kind of rare. Most of our negotiating that takes place is by foot. We leave the businesses we don't want to patronize and we go somewhere else. We do this with restaurants, we do this with stores, we do this with the catalogs, we do this with websites, we do this with our friends and our foes, and we do this. This is how we make most decisions in life. We just move to something better. And that's how wages are determined. That's how pretty much all prices are determined. It's just by who chooses to interact with whom. So if you impose this $11 minimum wage on yourself, you'd be limiting your options pretty heavily, and you'd end up making that decision to go for your next best option. But when the minimum wage is imposed on like a national level within the arbitrary geographical border called a country, and everyone in that border has this minimum wage imposed on them, you're not saying again, it's not a positive mandate, it is a conditional prohibition. So you're not saying that everyone should get paid this much, you're saying that no one will get a job unless it pays at least this much. That's going to leave a lot of people searching desperately for jobs that they just can't get because it has stripped them of a piece of their bargaining power. That's all it does. It hurts the working poor. It hurts them because it restricts their opportunity to sell their labor. And that's one of the first things you ever have to sell. That is your ticket into the market economy. That is how you get your social life started. Your productive, materially advancing social life starts by you selling your labor. The first thing you have that is yours, your labor, your ability to sell your labor. And when somebody comes in and takes a ice cream scoop out of your bucket of bargaining tools and says you can't use this, that, and the other because that's you compromising too much. You can't compromise that much. You have to maintain this arbitrary standard, and if you go below that, we're going to punish your employer. How does your employer react to that? Or your would-be employer? You've lost an opportunity to sell. So here's an example I like to use. Imagine if the government, instead of saying, well, there's this favored class of workers, we're going to favor a class of businesses who sell a particular product. And we say, they're so awesome, they shouldn't make any less than $50 a plate at their restaurant. Like it's some chain of restaurants, or it's a restaurant industry or something. And the government's like, the restaurant industry is so great, they shouldn't ever make less than $50 a plate. Well, to the restaurants that are like super high class, sell like dry aged beef and all these other things, and caviar on top of the salads and stuff like that. Those kind of places are going to get away with it. They're going to be fine. They're going to thrive in an environment where no one can charge less than $50 a plate. But what happens to the sandwich shop down the road? They're done. They're over. That whole concept is history. There is no such thing as fast food anymore. There's no such thing as casual dining anymore. If every plate has to be $50 per, it's an unworkable business model for anything other than a very high class restaurant. So, um, if people buy, yeah, you're going to get more, but because that new price changes people's behavior, you're going to end up getting ultimately less. And just like all these sandwich shops and stuff, they're going to close down. They're going to have to close down. It's the same thing with labor. Labor is not homogenous. Hours are not homogenous. An hour of a doctor's time is worth a heck of a lot more than an hour of somebody who sleeps. I don't know. I don't want to claim that there's something better or worse about particular types of jobs. There really isn't. Honest work is honest work. Good people do honest work. Whatever. But in a market where people do have scarce resources, you have to make judgments about what you value more. You'd never see Walmart hiring a licensed physician to stock shelves. It would never, ever happen because he has other things to do that command his time and are much more valuable according to his customers, who are willing to pay him a lot more than Walmart would when they could find somebody else to do that function. So resources get allocated. Resources, as I'm talking about labor, gets allocated appropriately according to what people need. And that's how prices should work. So the point of me going through this is to say that market prices mean something. Prices really mean something. They're not just what you pay at a grocery store. They come from somewhere. And when you have a market price in labor, you're optimizing your earnings, and you get a value scale of what kind of labor is more valuable. So people know if they want to earn more, they're going to have to go in this particular field. They're going to have to give this training. If you screw this up, people won't know where to go, and then the labor market's destroyed. But it can kind of be summed up in the one sentence that I really like. So I'm looking at notes on my phone. You won't make more by having someone prevent you from accepting less. If somebody comes in while you're trying to negotiate a trade and says, you cannot compromise this much, and you say, but I'm willing to. I want to compromise that much because I can get so much more than I have now if I make this compromise. And they're saying, no, you can't compromise that, so you walk away from the arrangement. It's bad for people. It is truly, legitimately a bad deal for people when somebody 3,000, or in Hawaii's case, what is it, like 5,000 or 6,000 miles away, is telling you what kind of decisions you can make and how you can interact with other people. It's enormously destructive. It's enormously wasteful. It's distorting of the market, and it costs people jobs. It costs people livelihood. It makes people worse off, and that is what I have to be against. So I just wanted to put that out there and get that off my chest. And I really appreciate whoever stuck through and listened to this whole thing. Until next time, thank you very much. This has been All Things Voluntary.